Hi class, welcome to Comparative Politics Lectures. We're looking at nations and society, and this is going to be part one of the lecture and I'm trying to keep it very short. Okay, so let's start. So the chapter 3, we talk about society and we talk about nation, but all of this starts with the state. Okay, so let's recap what we understand by the state. In international relations theory, we learned that a state is an entity that has territory, population, and the authority to govern that territory and population, okay? And this authority has to be recognized by other states. If it's not recognized, then we cannot say that this is a state, okay? There are lots of problems. So you want to be recognized because of many reasons. And we're not going to cover that right now. States are primary actors in international relations, okay? In comparative politics, we look at how the state governs over its population and territory. Civil society. Internally, we say there is a government and there is civil society. So government is the embodiment of the state, right? We say there's a state, but what is the state? Supposedly it has some authority to govern. And so that means there must be a government, right? So we call that the body of the state, basically embodiment. But what is civil society? We say that civil society as a whole is the population living in the state that is bound by constitution and social contract to serve the state, and which confers it rights in return, right? The civil society is given some rights by the state. So why does it sign a social contract? So social contract, basically, the question comes up because we learned earlier that civil war happens. And so civil society is essentially about preventing civil war. But did we ever sign the social contract? Or were we born into it, right? And we suddenly found out that we are bound by this contract when we are older. So this is very interesting. Most of us don't think about the process by which we become a citizen of a country. Many of us are born into the country, and then we find out this is the country that we belong to. We are citizens of this country. This is the country that gives us rights, and we are obligated to it in many ways, right? So how many of us even think about social contracts, right? We don't. We only learn about it and then find out. And in many countries, we actually never learn about these things until we're much older. Society. So Patrick O'Neill says, society is a broad term that refers to complex human organization, a collection of people bound by shared institutions that define how human relations should be conducted. So in general, when we talk about society, we think, oh, it's, people. We broadly call them society. That means they're more than people. There's some kind of social relations here, right? In society. That means we are bound to other people through human relations, right? So the question then is, what kind of human relations are we engaged in? And what are these shared institutions that he's talking about? So we know the human relations we have are through family, we have school, we make friends, we go to work, we have colleagues, we have church or other religious organization, we have people who attend the church, so those become our community, and then we have social clubs we belong to, associations. We also have relations with our neighbors, right? They are our people that live around us. We have certain kind of relations. Social institutions. So an institution essentially is something that has rules and norms, practices, right, that we are engaged in, which have rules and norms. Okay. So sometimes institutions are physical, which means they're actually existing objects and places, right? So you have the school, you have the hospital, you have government. We say the state is an institution. We say, markets are institutions, but it can also be an organization with its role, rules and norms, right? Other times, institutions are not physical, but they still exist. Let's look at some. You have traditional institutions. They can be based on, your faith is one kind of institution. We have marriage, parenting, friendship. All of these are regulated through your culture, the place that you grew up in, what kind of faith you have, what you learn from school. So all of these things are regulating. Like marriage, we say is an institution because there's so many rules about how people should get married. There are all these norms and customs and culture about when you should get married, who you should marry, how you should find your partner, who you cannot marry, all of that stuff, right? So there's rules and norms. Parenting, we also have rules and norms. Once you become a parent, you find out you're not supposed to do this, you can't do that. And all of this is kind of social. Social customs determine these things, right? So in some countries, you cannot have a child sleeping in the same bed as you. But in many countries, we allow children who are really small to be in the same room as the parents because they cry all night. And so you can't run to another room all the time. So a lot of practices are allowed. Also, you have a lot of norms about friendship. Who can be your friend, who cannot be your friend, all kinds of things, right? So let's look at modern institutions. By modern, you mean, anything that happened from the 17, 1800s onwards. This is when you have the rise of all these isms, capitalism, communism, socialism. You have markets, you have different types of economies, you have liberal education, democracy. All of these have sets of rules about them. These are practices with rules and norms, okay? So very briefly, we looked at society in Bangladesh and US and we made a comparison. Let's go to this in the next slide, rather the next talk. And so this is going to wrap up the first part of the lecture.